Council meeting for March the 6th. And the first thing we need to deal with here is the approval of the agenda. So I'll start with the first recommendation, and just for those of you in the audience, Councillor Hearn is attending electronically, and Councillor McCabe is, I think, enjoying a sunny holiday this week. So I have a motion here, recommendation, sorry, that the agenda for the March 6th, 2023 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we have a second recommendation. We're also dealing with our budget open house type of thing, and normally we don't allow public participation during a regular council meeting in terms of questions and comments. But in order to do that, we have a recommendation here. And I'm suggesting, judging by the size of the audience and their wish maybe to not sit through a whole bunch of boring stuff, that we move the deputation ahead in the agenda to following the disclosure of pecuniary interest. So the recommendation I have here is that the procedure bylaw be amended for this meeting to permit a meeting open to the public to discuss the 2023 budget, and further that deputations be permitted before open forum on the budget. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor Hearn. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to disclosure of pecuniary interest on anything on today's agenda. Councillor Burke.
Sorry, yes. So on the irregular agenda, I'm going to declare indirect pecuniary interest to 2A to D, and also on the public meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I need to address the nature. The nature is that appendixes for 2A to D were prepared by my employer, and for the public meeting, although the appendixes are not attached, my employer is involved with that work.
Okay, thank you. I have none to declare for anything on today's agenda. Councillor Hearn?
No, I do not.
And Councillor Rankin?
None.
Okay, thank you. With that said, as we've amended our agenda, we'll move the deputation up to this point in our agenda and welcome a significant group, I'm sure, speaking on behalf of the Arthur seniors. So I don't know, who have you appointed a spokesperson? Okay, do you mind coming up here to the microphone, please?
The people watching remotely can't hear unless you speak into this, because this records the sound. Okay, you sure can. Yep.
Okay. We received a voice message on February the 2nd, 23, saying there was no option to renew the lease. The seniors hall keep the senior citizens active with all their activities. During the week, we play bridge, euchre, cribbage, bid euchre, and shuffleboard. The AA rents the hall for its weekly meetings. The VON teaches exercise to seniors twice a week. People in the community rent the hall for funerals, luncheons, showers, birthday parties, anniversary parties, and Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving family gatherings. The hall has been used for 63 years by the seniors, and we wish to continue our activities in it. The AA wants to continue the use of the hall, as it is not obvious to the public that they can remain anonymous. One member told us that the seniors hall has kept him sober for 11 years. Good Lord, I didn't think there was this much. We are asking that special consideration be given to the seniors of Arthur. We would certainly appreciate that the township renew our lease so the seniors continue to enjoy the hall. This is the only place where the seniors can get together to engage in their activities and have fun. This is a large part of their social lives. The seniors feel that they are being treated as second-class citizens. In 1970, the seniors were granted permission by the Arthur Council to turn the town hall into the seniors hall. We are certainly appreciative of the township's contribution towards some of the building expenses. We feel that we have earned the privilege of the use of the Arthur Seniors Hall. The hall was reopened in March 2022 after COVID. We have 67 rentals till the end of this year. Thank you. Joyce?
In about 1970, a group of senior citizens leader under the leadership of John T. Smith approached the, you have to wait till I read this here, approached the village with a suggestion that we could turn it into a senior citizens hall. Councils were approved, and with the finalization of the now horizons granted from the government, work was then put on restoration appropriate by finally with the grant a new and many hours of volunteer hours were vigilant and helping to restore the former building. If the hall now is 144 years old, could talk, we would likely thank Arthur's energetic seniors for living and kind life and giving that has had a new leaf on life. Thank you. Excuse my reading because I can't see it.
Is there any further presentations at this point?
Vivian McDonald. I live in Mapleton, so I'm a foreigner here. This hall we're speaking about was built before Confederation, 3 years before Confederation. It was funded by the local people. The reason it was built was to be a drill hall for a defense against the Fenians, who were Irish nationals coming through the States to Canada. They came to Upper Canada because the States was busy having their own war. Canada wasn't. Canada was Upper Canada, Lower Canada, and the Eastern provinces, which weren't even provinces at that time. That a hall of this value has been able to deteriorate so badly is a shame on all the people in the area. I think we need to discuss renovating. Let's get this piece of history back where it belongs, in the hands of the local people.
Is that any other presentations at this point? Okay. Thanks very much for that. Is there any questions from council? Okay. So I guess in terms of the process, I'm not sure what the nature of the message that the group got, but I know that I was involved when the most recent lease was drawn up. And my understanding was there was no provision for automatically renewing the lease on the building. But if there's a wish to continue to use that building, I think the township is open to having a conversation about that. The question then becomes what's the best approach to that. I know that when we renewed the lease the last time, there was significant discussion about trying to obtain Trillium grants and that type of thing to do some upgrades to the building. And so I think maybe we've got some time. It's March. The lease is good till the end of the year for sure. So maybe it's time to have some discussion. There's clearly an interest in continuing with the use of that building, so we can get into some discussion about how to make that happen and what the terms of that lease ought to be for if the group wants to continue to lease the building. So I don't think that I'm not sure there's really can't give you any further answer than that today, other than that we're open to having a discussion. Perhaps this is a significant group. Maybe a smaller group might be useful in terms of hammering out the details. But certainly we're quite willing to have a discussion about that. I know that one of the next items on our list is the budget, and our financial stress on our organization is significant in the future, coming into the future period of time. So in terms of our commitment to upgrading that facility is probably going to be very difficult discussion. So, but certainly we're prepared to have discussion and work towards accommodation where it's possible. Any other questions, comments from council at this point?
I have one question here.
Okay.
What was council going to do if they
Do
weren't
you mind,
going to renew the lease?
sorry, do you mind standing up here so that,
I don't stand well.
oh, sorry.
We'll repeat the question for you, sir. Just,
Okay.
it's okay.
Well, you're okay. I said, what was council going to do with that building if they didn't renew the lease? Were they going to tear it down, or what were they thinking of?
I don't think that this,
The question for
Sorry.
people on the Zoom meeting is what was council's or staff's intention of doing with the building if the lease was not renewed?
and I would say there's no decision been made in that regard at this point. I know that when we crafted the lease a few years ago, I forget how many years ago that was. There was concern about the state of the building, as was alluded to, and how long is it appropriate to have the building operating with a, as time buildings deteriorate.
Is it not a historical building?
No.
Why not? Is my question.
So the question is it an historical building?
It certainly has a history to it, but it has not been declared any particular designation at this point. And so while we're open to having the discussion, there is some concerns around the cost to operate the building. And frankly, we want to have a building that our citizens, senior citizens, can be proud of and be proud to utilize. So where we find the right balance with that is going to be the challenge. Councillor Rankin.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. I'm just wondering if the decision is made not to renew the lease, where would all these different organizations be able to meet?
So there are other locations in Arthur that could be used. They aren't necessarily as flexible as this particular location, but that would have to be something that would be discussed through the process.
But Mount Forest has a huge for seniors. There, Palmerston has someplace for seniors. Yeah, there's about 4 small towns that have seniors, like they've got someplace to go. Why not?
Yeah, there's no seniors hall in Mount Forest. They use the sports complex in there at there.
Something for seniors. But they have a complex.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, if alternatives want to be discussed, I think we're open to having discussion about alternatives as well.
Well, I think the upstairs in the arena would not be suitable for seniors. With stairs and other things, I think the upstairs for the arena would not be suitable for seniors to, especially for doing the stairs. I don't do stairs well myself, so most seniors do not. So it would have to be something on the ground level.
Thanks. And I don't think that today is the best opportunity for us to have a negotiation around what that looks like. So I think, thank you for coming to make a presentation. Perhaps you can organize a group to have the discussions, and we'll certainly participate in that discussion to find a suitable accommodation, either continuing with the existing facility or some other accommodation. We are committed, I believe, to finding a way to accommodate the needs of the seniors group some way within our community. I don't like the term dismissed, but we do have other business we need to get to. Well, maybe I should ask the question, what were you expecting to accomplish today? I think you've delivered the request that you would like to discuss renewing the lease. I think we're open to that. I'm not sure what more your expectations were at this stage.
What repairs are needed for that building? Does anybody?
I shut it off, Karen.
Just can read me this thing. What repairs are needed on this building? If we have an engineer check it out, what the cost would be should be looked at too.
Thank you. We've talked about the arena before. He will not go there because it's not private. And we could not go up those stairs. And the elevator, what does it hold, 2 people or 3? We'd be already going to, and we need it every day of the week, not just one day. Because we play cards all day, all week. So if you're going to think of doing this flat, it's not damn good.
Anyone else before I put it back?
All right. Thank you all for taking the time to come in today, and certainly we will, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish. But we do have other business we need to get to, and certainly if you've got a group that wants to sit down and have a discussion in a bit more detail, this is probably not the best forum. We can certainly accommodate that. Yes. I'm going to look to our CAO for some guidance there.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, thank you for the question. I think staff can arrange to meet with a group of representatives from the seniors hall within the next few weeks if you're interested. So I think what staff can do is take this away. We'll put together the right team of folks to answer some of the questions that we've heard from you folks today. And that way we can advance the conversation a little bit further. We know the deadlines that we're all working towards, and I think having a good understanding of what the seniors would like to accomplish and some of the activities and things like that, we can develop a plan for moving forward and maybe better determine the timelines that we need to make some of those decisions. And if we have to bring back a report to council, we can do that as well. Thank you.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is our budget discussion.
I'm just kidding. Bullets before.
Oh, yeah, I know how to clear a room, don't I?
Are you dismissed?
Okay, so we're doing things a little bit differently this year to try to facilitate our budget discussion. So we're opening up an opportunity for public questions and comments for the budget discussion. So we included in our package was the updated, the presentation from February 27th, special meeting of council. So my plan here is to not go through that in detail again. I think everybody has access to that. We have an update presentation from the CAO. And although it's not listed on the agenda, I would then open it up to council for questions and comments. I know I have some comments here from Councillor McCabe, who wasn't able to be here today, that I will read on his behalf, and then we'll open it up for public questions and comments after that. So I'll turn it over to you, Brooke.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, thanks so much for the opportunity to present today's update on the budget process. And what I'd like to do is just provide a bit of a summary of the last meeting's conversation. So on February the 26th, our treasurer did present the first draft of the 2023 budget. And that draft included a business as usual option that included an operating budget focused on delivering our core services at existing service levels, as well as a capital budget focused on continuing to make progress on our infrastructure needs, both new, existing, and future. So the outcome of the budget process is expected to be a tax levy decision on various capital projects, which we will focus on, a scope of work for core service delivery, and confirmation of the staff resource level for 2023. So just in terms of summary, the case that was presented was an option that looked at about a total budgeted tax levy of 7.08%, taking into account the organic growth through assessment of 2.26%. The impact to the existing taxpayer would be about 4.82. We also provided some information on the capital program, which was the proposed projects based on the different service areas, as well as a discussion on two of the larger capital projects, which we are hoping to get some direction from council on, those being the Mount Forest Outdoor Pool and Aquatic Center, as well as things like the future Arthur Wastewater Treatment Plant, Phase 2. This slide just provides an overview of the capital program trend over the last few years. And you can see that we've been spending between sort of 15 million to 18 million. Version 1 of our 2023 budget includes both those larger capital projects I just mentioned. And you can see why version 2 looks at removing those projects to see what our capital spending would be without them, which is more in line with the trends. But again, we are looking for council direction on some of those capital projects. And this slide just outlines the funding that we have available. So for the 2023 budget, we have about $17 million in capital funding available. This slide here just provides an overview of where our reserve funds are in terms of the almost end of year 2022 balance. And then what I wanted to do today was just highlight some of the discussion that we heard at the last meeting, just to give folks a sense of some of the key issues that staff will be considering when we bring back the next presentation of the budget. So we heard a lot about the infrastructure gap, and it seems clear that we still have quite a bit of work to do as a community to fund the backlog of needed infrastructure. So that's both replacement and rehabilitation. We also need to better understand the element of growth that is affecting much of our new or existing infrastructure needs. And that's the reason for that, is that we need to be able to quantify it and understand how we can fund it appropriately. So whether it's through DCs, debt, developer contributions, things like the gas tax. Based on the past year's trending in terms of costs in the infrastructure world, we also heard that it sounded reasonable that a contingency for potential capital cost overruns was a fair thing to include in this budget, just to be on the safe side, because we do see a fair bit of uncertainty in terms of those costs. We also heard about human resource investments, and we heard that the proposed staffing investments need to be incorporated into the overall draft operating budget, and that staff has been requested to develop a strategy for smoothing those increases as well. We heard that it'd be helpful to have additional budget scenarios presented at the next council meeting. So we will be looking at creating a few other scenarios that council can consider. And we heard that the tax levy increase really should be considered in relation to the rate of inflation for last year, which was around 6.8%. We need to better understand future growth. So understanding the growth projections for the community will absolutely help us determine the appropriate allocation of resources. And this could impact staging and funding of infrastructure, as well as township facility requirements, existing, future, and those that might be deemed excess. And we had a little bit of a discussion around the 2023 growth management strategy and how that strategy could be used to address some of these questions. So staff is taking that under consideration as well, and we'll be bringing back some information on that. So again, the purpose of today's meeting is to allow both members of the public or council to ask any additional questions or items for clarification. We are hoping to get direction on the target levy for 2023. We are hoping to have more direction in terms of the capital projects related to the Mount Forest pool, and specifically a township upset limit that we can begin to work with, and any other items that council may want to discuss. We also would like to get a sense of the comfort level in terms of utilization of reserves or reserve funds to reduce contributions to the capital program from the levy, and any other feedback that council or the public wishes to provide us with. And that does conclude my summary. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'll open it up for any questions or comments from council. Councilor.
So when I went through the detailed budget that was presented at the end of February, I noticed that in roads and transportation, my understanding from previous budgets was that some of those jobs that had been overlooked in prior years would be considered for future budgets. And I'm specifically talking about Concession 4 North. We've heard for several years now from the residents out there that they would like to have that road paved. And I understand there's some reconstruction and rehabilitation to be done to that road. So I guess my question is why that has been overlooked. It hasn't even made the list. And also in the spreadsheet, it has the pool put out to 2027, which is a huge concern, being as we just endorsed the work plan and the build has it for 2025. So I'm not sure who wants to address that question. And there are other capital projects that I think that are larger projects that I really believe we need to look at, not potentially new, but refurbishing and rehabilitating some of the structures that we have. And the one example I'll use is the new Mount Forest Fire Hall. It continues to be put on documents put in front of council, but there's been no real discussion on how we are going to get there and why there is a need for it. I'll leave it at that for now.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I was thinking perhaps Matt may want to comment on specifically the Concession 4 North project.
Matt, do you want to tackle that one?
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. Like the roads team is very familiar with Concession 4 North, and it has been a project that's been talked about for a long time. But staff have not put it forward. Like, we think it's best served as a gravel road. But if council decides differently, then that's a different program. But I mean, we're out to the Ferguson pit a lot, and we're very cognizant. we're doing a double run of calcium at this point, and anyway, there has always been lots of feedback as it relates to that section of road. I guess from a staff standpoint, we still don't feel it's warranted to pave it. But certainly if council feels it's warranted to pave it, staff would pave it.
Yeah, just to clarify, Matt, if I could, when you say staff don't believe it's warranted, and I'm assuming that's based on traffic volume and the nature of the road, is that correct?
It would be traffic volume and also the condition of the road. Like, we're very familiar with the condition of the road, and we maintain it well.
Councillor Burke.
If I might. Well, I would suggest that the residents that live out on that road have a different feeling on the condition of the road. And that's why I bring it forward, because it has been generally been on the list. And the fact that it hasn't even made the list, I can just imagine the phone calls I'm going to get regarding that. And we have talked about, council has talked about it previously, and I think that there should be further discussion based on past conversations to have that section, one section in particular, paved.
Okay. Did you have any other follow-up questions, Councillor Burke?
So I also, my other question was not necessarily to Matt, but well, I guess perhaps it is the question with regards to the 10-year forecast. The pool's been put out to 2027, and I'm just want clarification whether that's a typo or whether we are backpedaling on the work plan that was put forward and it just recently approved by council that says the pool will be built in 2025.
Okay, Matt, I see you have your hand up.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Mayor Lennox. So I guess what's before council is kind of a financing plan. So it's trying to figure out the dollars we're going to need to spend at certain points in time. Certainly the work plan that was presented February 6th shows a pool build in the summer of 2025. So I wouldn't read too much into it. There's lots of variability in terms of trying to figure out that financing plan. The logistics of what's happening is harder to define, and I think council has a no go or a go decision as it relates to the 23 and the 24 budget. So that's kind of from a staff standpoint, you know, that's hard to forecast is maybe what I would say, but that's my opinion.
Okay, Farhad, I see you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox. I will just add what Matt just said. In terms of the 10-year capital forecast, we try to look at what are the capital need for 10 years for the two big projects like Arthur Wastewater treatment plant phase 2 and the pool. These are explicit decision point. In the last meeting, I talked about two-stage decision. First stage is go, no go. We don't have a clear direction yet whether go, no go. And second stage is if it is a go, how should we proceed? Because council already approved $576,000. The staff only spent $75,000 of it. Should staff move ahead and spend the money already spent? So I will say not reading too much into putting it into in 2027. That is pretty much to see if we stage is that way, how it looks like. If council make a decision, pool is a go, we'll make it happen.
Any other questions, Councillor Burke?
Yeah, so thank you for the comments, gentlemen. I just really wanted clarification on that because when residents and the aquatics committee see that, there's going to be a lot of questions pertaining to that because the go or no go trigger has already impacted conversations with regards to the pool and the fundraising efforts. My other comment would be around those large capital projects, such as water towers, the replacement of operation facilities and fire halls. We see these as line items, but we've never really had a conversation around this table. And I think it's really important, and it's time that we start doing that.
Yeah, go ahead, Brooke.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I think that that's a really important part and part of what we were anticipating through the growth management strategy. As we look at growth and better define what those growth needs might be, it's also going to impact our facility needs. And that's really where we can have a more detailed discussion around, again, what are our current assets? What are some of the opportunities for using those assets, whether differently or if we need new assets, you know, what are they and what's the best way to proceed with those and stage those and finance those. So again, this capital forecast is kind of the staff's first attempt at just getting a high level view. But there's much more refinement that can be done as we develop our asset management plans, as we get the next phase of the growth management strategy done, particularly around our facilities. And so I would agree. I think there's much more conversation to come on that piece. And this is really just a placeholder, just so that we're not forgetting some of the bigger projects that may need to be considered as the community grows.
Other questions, comments at this point? Councillor Rankin.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lennox, to Matt. I was just wondering, I know that we have decided to redo Cork Street, and yes, it does need it. But I'm just wondering about some other streets that may not have to have the whole street done. For instance, Birmingham, as it curves around down to Queen Street, and Dublin, they're in dire need of some help as well.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. I think Dublin is on the docket as part of the urban project next or this year, I guess. But Birmingham West, as it relates to Durham Street, is something that I can put on my radar. But I think Dublin between Queen and the hospital, I think, is on the urban paving program for this year. And she's pretty rough.
Other questions, comments?
I have-
Councillor Burke?
I have one more question, and this is probably mostly directed to Matt. There appears to be a lot of carryover projects into this budget, and I'm just wondering, with the large number of carryover projects, what is the true capacity for the new asks?
Okay. Matt?
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. That's a fair question. And in 2022, we didn't do any bridge projects, which I think was about a $800,000 touch. So we, as a staff, we didn't deliver on what council decided was the budget. I think there's a lot of risk as it relates to that. As far as staff capacity, that's probably the biggest risk. I think from a township standpoint, there's money available to do capital projects, but sometimes there's not capacity internally to do them. And that's, anyway, and I own that for 2022. Like I was acting CAO for 4 months and I didn't deliver on the projects that we signed up to. So that's on me.
Farhad, I saw you had your hand up.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, just to add on the funding part of it, in March 20th, I will show after allocating money from all the sources, what is the impact on our reserve fund. So in terms of $15 million worth of capital project, and let's say close to $8 million worth of carry forward, it will have a significant dent on our reserve fund. Just at the top of my mind, currently we have close to $21 million of reserve fund. If we deliver $15 million as previous year in 2023, our reserve fund will come down to $14 or $15 million.
You. Other questions? Comments? Okay, I have a lengthy email sent from Councillor McCabe that I'll read, but before I do that, I just wanted to make a couple of comments myself, and I wanted to thank staff for putting together a 10-year forecast. I realize there's a lot of work to be done on that, and especially on how we close that infrastructure gap that's been identified through our asset management planning process. And a lot of those projects come out of our master plan, master water and sewer servicing plans as well. So those projects have been identified for some time, but we didn't know exactly how it was going to fit together. And the bigger question, and we're not there yet, is figuring out how we're going to finance those projects. And as we can see, there's a huge potential gap there that we're going to have to figure out a way to close. And while we may not know the exact number of what that is today, we know that it's significant and that we can't, it's not going to be an easy gap to close. But I think this is the first step in having a long-term asset acquisition or renewal plan and figuring out how we're going to finance it, or how we're going to have to ask our residents to finance it through the taxation system or user fees. So I think it's a great first step, and I thank the staff for the work that's went into that. I know there's a whole lot more work that needs to get us to the fine detail that we're going to need to make decisions around, but it's a great first step. With that, I will refer to speak on behalf of Councillor McCabe, who wasn't able to be here, and unfortunately, because due to illness, wasn't able to be at our special meeting last week either. And I will just read from his email message to me. So he has here, in the 10-year forecast, Kenilworth Town Hall for $3.2 million, Mount Forest Sportsplex for $3.5 million. What's this for? ? And then in the recreation budget for this year, he has another $75,000 for the Sportsplex. So he's asking some questions around some of that. And then he goes on to say, I would strongly argue against the $200,000 for the parking lot in Kenilworth. I see no justification for it. I'd rather this money spent to do all of Side Road 7 East to the corner that was most recently done to concession 2, or pave the top portion of concession 4 North. This road is pounded by gravel trucks, and the maintenance required to keep this up would likely be a cost neutral project in the long run. And he had a question with regard to the SCBA replacement, $400,000. He says this is key, but can it be done over a few years? And then he goes on to ask about another pickup truck. This has got to get aligned with truck purchases all at the same time. These one-off buys are killing us. I think what he's suggesting is more group buying there, or timing, clustering them together to try to get a better deal. Then he goes on to talk about Sobeys traffic signal for $500,000. Why are we paying for this? We ask Sobeys to pay for this and we maintain it. I know they would be okay with this. Then his next one is roads needs study, $75,000. What will this tell us? And what we don't already know? Why outsource this? And then he talks about equipment, backhoe, $275,000, truck plow, $360,000, pickup, $60,000. And he indicates he'd like to push those purchases off to next year. Now I'll stop there for the moment in case staff have any input into some of that, and the rest of his comments are regarding the Mount Forest pool. Matt, are you able to help with some of that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. If you repeat the questions, I'll give you an answer, but I don't remember exactly the sequence of the questions. Sorry.
Okay, well, I'll take this a little bit out of order. So he talks about the $200,000 for the parking lot in Kenilworth. I'm not sure he realizes that that's pushed off to a future year.
Yeah. So through you, Mayor Lennox, like the Kenilworth parking lot is something we've been talking about for several years, just a repave job, because it's kind of failing as far as its alligatoring and it's cracking. But I think that one isn't an ask for the current year. So it's something that we've asked for a long time. It's kind of, I would use an analogy that it's similar to the Mount Forest Sportsplex, where we ask to get the pavement put down on the east side of the Mount Forest Sportsplex, but it never seems to happen. But we got to ask for it because it would make life easier.
Okay. This next one is around the pickup truck. I think what he's getting at is it possible to time this so that we get better group buying? Go ahead, Matt.
Yep, through you, Mayor Lennox. So for some of our big equipment now, we're able to enter a provincial purchasing group. That provincial purchasing group just hasn't gone down to the pickup level. The challenge is that, you know, the usage of the pickup is, or the deterioration of the pickup is based on its year, right? And having a big expense, again, that could be a conversation, but I think it's almost better just to have a steady amount that you replace a certain amount of pickups or a certain amount of equipment each year.
Okay.
If I may I
Go ahead.
May I interject? I also echo Councillor McCabe's sentiments. About this time last year, I asked for a fleet management review, and I'm still waiting for it. So I have a really hard time supporting any of the fleet asks that are being presented in the budget.
Okay. The next one, Matt, was the Sobeys traffic signal, $500,000. And I don't know whether you can comment on this or not. Go ahead. I see your hand, so go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say, Mayor Lennox, that's been consistent with the conversation, what we're putting forward. I think council had a real desire to put in signals on the north end of Mount Forest. And, you know, we have a development agreement in place with Canadian Tire that would put some money forward. So, I mean, council ultimately can do what council wants, but I think the conversation or the agreement that's put forward or the budget is consistent with what the conversation has been with the developers.
Farhad?
Just to add more clarification to it, the total project cost is 525,000, but developer is contributing 120,000 of it. So township's own money is 405,000 will be spent on this project.
Okay. That's the contribution from Canadian Tire, I believe, that was made at the time of that development.
120,000, yes.
Yeah. Okay, then the next one is the road needs study. The question is, why outsource this? Matt, I'm going to look to you for this one.
Yep, no, thank you, Mayor Lennox. So our last road needs study was done in 2013 or 2014. Our roads represent, I think, $375 million worth of assets. So the idea of spending $70,000 to better understand them and their replacement needs, I guess from a staff standpoint, makes a lot of sense. It's not something that is always front of mind, but where it comes up actually is in a place like Mount Forest on the east side. So Birmingham, like, does that need to be a road in the future through Birmingham East from Curve Rock, say, to London, or can that remain just a utility corridor? And we haven't studied that enough. And from a township staff standpoint, we don't really have the capability of, you know, of sitting down and really trying to figure out what makes sense.
Okay. Thank you. Did you have your hand up, Farhad, for that one?
Yes, Mayor Lennox. I just want to add a further comment on it because we are going through the third year of our asset management plan through the province-wide initiative. And as part of that, on the fourth year, we will need to update the condition of all of our assets. Currently, we base many of our decisions based on age, but we know age is a good indicator, but some assets based on the usage deteriorate faster or some other condition. So need study and a condition assessment is required for the last phase of the asset management plan. And that will determine our future tax transfer from the province, what portion we get in terms of infrastructure funding.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one to you, Matt, I think is around the fleet, the backhoe truck, plow, pickup truck. Are these purchases that could be deferred?
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. So I guess generally speaking, the township has probably about $9 million of fleet. So in order to do a 12-month cycle, we need to spend $700,000 a year. So can these be deferred? Certainly. Do we get behind? We got to spend $700,000 a year just to have a 12-month cycle, or 12-year cycle, sorry. So, you know, sometimes the roads manager will call me and he'll say, well, you know, the motor has failed and it's $5,000. There's no option at that point because we need the equipment, right? We're trying to stay ahead of the curve as it relates to replacement of fleet. But can they be deferred? They certainly could be deferred. We're just trying to put forward kind of I would say the prudent way forward. But yeah, it just might mean more expense in 2023 for those pieces of equipment.
Okay. And then the only other question I think is still outstanding from Steve's comments is for the fire chief. I see his camera coming on. I think he must have anticipated my comment. I think he's looking for some background on the SCBA replacement. Chris.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. Through you, yeah, that one's pretty simple. The SCBA, unlike our bunker gear and other equipment that we do a little bit each year, SCBA has to be done all at once. With the new NFPA standards and that coming out, we're going from we're going from half-hour bottles to 45 minutes. So you can't have a combination of half-hour and 45-minute. You have to have all or nothing. So it's an all or nothing because it requires us to upgrade our compressor unit as well to be able to fill the 45-minute bottles. So yeah, unfortunately, this is one that we have to bite the bullet and do it all at once.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right. I guess I'll move on to Councillor McCabe's comments with regard to the pool. I'm quoting directly from him. I sat awake this past Friday night / early Saturday morning. It wasn't the thunder or lightning or the blowing wind from the storm that kept me awake. It was the subject of the Mount Forest pool. Council have all seen the first crack at the 2023 budget and the forecasted needs for our township for the next 10 years. This exceeds over $194 million. This council is at a point where we must decide what is the right direction for 2023 and beyond. This will be our guiding document for the years to come. Our focus should be on the delivery of real priorities, grow our community, provide roads, services, and infrastructure that hinges on stability, justification for expenditures, our debt load, and our overall fiscal health. Where I struggle is justification for expenditures, among other things. I'm talking about the need for the Mount Forest pool. Many of our neighboring municipalities don't have any pool, and for the longest time we had two. We had to close the pool in Mount Forest because the cost to repair was throwing good money after a bad idea, while at the same time we had reduced hours in Arthur due to lack of staff, which begs a couple of questions. Why do we need two pools? Why should we even bother to build another pool when we cannot staff the one that we have now? I cannot justify this. Secondly, priorities and values. What is or what does the value of a new pool bring, and who gets value from a pool? We already have the analysis of how many people used the pool in Mount Forest. At the generous end of the scale, it was 100 people per month for 3 months at best. Where is the value? Why spend $6 million plus for 300 people for 3 months a year? This is not value when compared to an equal expenditure like the Mount Forest water tower or upgrades to the Mount Forest wastewater treatment plant. Their expenditures have value for every single person in Mount Forest every day, every hour. This is something I can defend. Seriously, if it came down to it, a pool or a water tower or upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, the answer is obvious. Shouldn't this be the question we ask ourselves? Which leads to priorities. The pool Love me or hate me is not a priority. How is it? Again, I go back to the value. In the overall management of the township, where does a pool rank versus hard infrastructure or reinvestment in existing facilities, not building new ones? So going forward with my eye on fiscal health, budgeting for real value expenditures that move the township forward, keeping in mind debt load as well as what expenditures will bring value for all of our residents, not just a few, even if we could staff a new pool to guard them, I cannot support $6+ million for a new Mount Forest pool. We are having a hard time servicing what we have now. It is not feasible, it is not warranted, it is fiscally irresponsible, and I am not convinced that all of our residents see this as a priority that would have us shelf actual projects that do bring value to the township and everyone that lives here and will live here. This pool is a want versus a need, or better yet, this is a wish versus what is actually a necessity. That's the end of his comments. Any questions or comments or any further discussion before we move to public questions? Councillor Burke.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment with regards to Councillor McCabe's comments pertaining to the pool. I think that Mr. McCabe or Councillor McCabe's comments are fairly incorrect to the feeling of the residents of Mount Forest. And I believe that not just as chair of aquatics, it's something that the community wants. It's something the community believes in. And it is unfortunate that the chair of recreation does not support something that the residents of Mount Forest feel that is important to the safety of children. I think all children should learn how to swim and have the opportunity to do so. Along with the seniors, we've just heard that they are always looking for activities. We have seniors that swim in the morning and haven't been able to do that for the last year. And it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do that for a couple of years. And I would suggest that we go back to a comment that was made almost a year ago, that we would bring this back to the public for their comments and have a public meeting again regarding the pool.
Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I fully justify what Councillor McCabe has said about the budget. I understand his reasoning. However, I have to give full support to Councillor Burke. I believe the youth, especially of this town, they deserve to have the ability to go swimming and to have the ability to have some exercise. We are expecting a greater number of people living in our community soon. And I do believe that it's justified in being able to give those people the opportunity, as well as, yes, seniors do, and just adults, if we can have it. And I do understand that there is a staffing issue. That's something we can work on and hopefully be able to upgrade and have enough to get the pool going. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this point? Councillor Hearn.
I might as well weigh in, and I'm about the whole pool thing, and I'm pretty divided about it too. And I've kind of like Councillor McCabe. I think I lied awake. Maybe it wasn't Friday night, might have been Thursday night, but I thought an awful lot about it and really struggling with it. Kind of feeling that if we go forward with it, we're going to fall behind in every other way or tax people up the yin yang. But if we don't go forward with it, I do agree that children need to learn how to swim, and seniors need the recreation. If we were to not go forward with the pool, we do need to find a permanent way, a method to get people to the other pool that we can actually staff. And that's kind of my only comment around that at this point in time.
Okay. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you. I don't believe, if if we go ahead and just have the one pool in Arthur, I don't believe you're going to get the majority of the residents traveling down to Arthur to swim. They're just going to be going without, or spending the money going out of town to drive to an indoor pool such as Hanover or Fergus, the money leaving our community rather than staying within it.
Any other questions or comments at this point? I was thinking we could,
I'd just like to make one more comment, and that is that, one, I've made the suggestion that we have a public meeting, and I would like a decision made on that today. I think it's important that some discussion continue to move forward. On March the 21st, the Aquatics Committee, Fundraising Committee is having another meeting. And I think it's really important that we have some kind of direction to give them. If we are not moving forward, if the no-go trigger is being pulled, we need to know that.
so I think what I'll do at the moment is reopen the meeting for public members to participate. And then we can come back and have any further discussion. I know there's some points that staff are looking for from a direction perspective. So do we have anyone registered to speak?
Well, Charlie was, but he's not on the line. Did you have any comments or questions, Bill? Yeah, you have to speak. And then I see one other member of the public other than reporter. And Rick, if you would like to speak, if you just want to raise your hand and I would move you into the meeting. I know you didn't pre-register, but if you want to, just raise your virtual little hand there.
Go ahead, Bill. Welcome.
Mayor, oh, thank you, Mayor Lennox and council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the subject. In my perspective, I guess in hearing comments of Councilman McCabe and certainly Councillor Ahern and some of their concerns, although I certainly admire and respect their opinions with respect to fiscal responsibility and would certainly endorse that. However, sometimes in government, as we all know, we have to take some actions that are supportive of the people. Fiscal responsibility is important, but we also have to have social responsibility. My concern here is that I'm not providing a facility like this. First of all, there's going to be a tremendous backlash. Is my general feel on council and the view towards council and the municipality in general. I think that it's a huge blow to the services and the infrastructure, which we as a community, and when I say we as a community, I'm talking about Wellington North, not just Mount Forest. When we're attracting government, or pardon me, factories, businesses, and that, they look for well-rounded communities. And at this point in time, yes, we have two communities, much like Minter was 3 urban centers to support. And I think by not supporting a swimming pool, which provides the safety provisions of swimming, the recreation, also abilities for the public, young and old alike, I think this would be a tremendous blow to the image of this municipality and certainly to the service provided to our community. Councilman McCabe's quote statistics, I can't either comment on the accuracy of those, but I would suggest that a improved pool over what we had would certainly attract more attention and more use, which is most importantly. So I think if council is to pull a no trigger, as Councillor Burke has commented on, I think this will be just a tremendous disservice to the entire community of Wellington North, and particularly certainly Mount Forest. So I would certainly support Councillor Burke's comments and suggestion that council do have a public meeting. This is a really, really important subject. And I think the public needs to have some input before any decision, one way or the other, yes or no, is made. So respectfully submitted this impromptu report or comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Do we have anybody else? Karen?
Somebody's got their hand up and that would be Mr. Cinnamon. Okay, so I'm going to promote you to a panelist. Maybe just a minute. And you're going to have to accept being promoted, Rick, and then you'll get moved into the meeting.
Thank you for that, Karen. And I just wanted to council and to the mayor specifically as well too, that I echo Mr. Nelson's comments completely. I support what Sherry is talking about as a public meeting. I have used that Mount Forest pool for a long time. I've been in this community for 30 some odd years. And the only time that I've never used the pool was last year when it was shut down. I'd really like to use a pool in Mount Forest before I have to shell out an increase in money for my plot out at the Mount Forest Cemetery. But I think we need a public meeting. I don't believe for a minute that we need to spend $6 some odd million on a pool. I think that there needs to be a realistic plan for that pool put forward to not just council, but to this community as well too. And I echo Mr. Nelson's thoughts that this just isn't Mount Forest. This is the whole Wellington North community. And we need to take that into consideration as well too. This pool question has been on not just this council's table, but previous councils before it for the past, I don't know, Sherry, you can help me out here, but it's got to be at least 20, maybe 25 years that this has been bandied about. And, you know, I share Matt Aston's talk as well too, that, you know, there's a lot of things asked of council. I recognize that, but council sooner or later has got to make a decision and do something and put this community forward into the rest of Wellington County as well too. That's my comments.
Just with Jessica McFarland into the meeting, she had her hand up as well.
Okay, welcome, Jessica.
Hi, thank you. I wasn't planning on talking today. I was actually just listening in. It seems that a few of us are all on the same page, Sherry and Bill and Rick. I appreciate everybody's comments, but I say this as a member of the ad hoc committee. I also say this as a parent of children in Mount Forest, that I have a huge concern if the council is going to go against having this new pool after we've been talking about this for so long. And I was pretty excited to actually join the committee to fundraise for this pool. I have been a bit frustrated, and I think everybody knows, council knows that our committee, the ad hoc committee, has been wanting to meet with council members. We did have a public meeting, or we had some public input last year, but I think everybody should be in agreement that we need some more public input, because I think you'll see and hear that the public will be, and Mount Forest specifically, residents will be really upset if they don't have a pool. I also signed up my child for swimming lessons last year, and we drove to Arthur. And the consensus seemed that there was a lot of parents that weren't able to make the trip to Arthur, whether that was maybe a scheduling conflict, or a lot of parents that didn't actually have the transportation to make it to Arthur. And I know a lot of other people that were pretty upset that they had to even make the drive, or expected to make the drive to Arthur. So I think there's a lot of parents that would see the need and would sign up their children for sports at the pool. So I think a public meeting and a meeting with a committee, the ad hoc committee with counselors would be a great idea. Thank you.
Any other members of the public on this, Karen?
No.
Okay. Thank you for those contributions. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you. Just to advance a comment that Mr. Nelson made, it made me think we are definitely lacking in staff to staff the pool once we do get it built. I'm just wondering, when we have the public meeting, could we encourage people to become trained or certified in being able to be a lifeguard or staff the pool, and have some incentive to try and get their certification, so we have it by the time the pool is completed?
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this point? Yeah, I would just add some comments perhaps to the pool discussion specifically, and then I think we need to, we can have further discussion, but we'll need to come back to give staff some direction to get us to a budget for 2023. I don't disagree with any of the comments with regard to the desirability and need for a pool in Mount Forest. For me, the question becomes, how do we pay for that? Or how can that be paid for? And the struggle I have with that is with the amount of infrastructure that we need to build and maintain over the next 10 years makes the financial viability of that look very difficult. So if someone can offer me a solution of how to help pay for that, I am absolutely in favor of proceeding with the pool. The question then becomes, how do we pay for it? And this council had a report from staff within the last month that talked about our ability to finance such a venture. And we unanimously agreed that we couldn't use long-term, or we're not going to primarily use long-term debt for that purpose. So I think the question then becomes, what is our role in financing the pool and how do we do that? So I would love to hear from other members of council about their thoughts on how we can accomplish that. Because if we can come up with a solution to that problem, I think the rest of it, the situation will fall into place. And I'm looking at members of council for some response to that. Councillor Burke.
I'll go first. So I think it's really important, as we've talked about, that council comes to an aquatics committee meeting. There seems to be two conversations happening that I can see. And that is that we talk about the cost, what it is going to cost. And there has been no goal set for the committee. The committee has a lot of great fundraising ideas, and I would also probably suggest that they also have an idea of what is attainable for them to fundraise. So I think that if a conversation could be had between the two parties, if you will, a lot of this decision making could be a lot easier on council. We seen at the last council meeting, regular council meeting, some options, but nothing, but that was it. They were just options. There was no discussion. And it hasn't even been presented to the aquatics committee, which is being asked not only to raise money for the enhancements, which was the original mandate, but to also help with the bricks and mortar. I just think those conversations need to be had.
So if I could follow up on that, Councillor Burke, do you have a sense of what you think is a realistic goal?
I'm not going to answer that question on behalf of the committee. I think that that's a committee discussion. I chair the committee, but I won't speak for the committee as a whole.
And I really wasn't asking you to. I was asking your personal view on that.
I guess that really depends on what the final dollar figure is. I would say that if it's option 3 for $2.5 million, probably 2027 is not soon enough for the pool, or is too soon for the pool. There are a lot of other funding opportunities out there, and if we don't get out of the gate on the pool sooner than later, we're going to miss some of those opportunities, because there are other fundraising within the municipality that is going to happen. And some of those dollars may be supported versus the pool. But we've been doing this dance since 2016, when the original conversation started, and 2019, more specifically, that the committee's been asking for a goal, and we're still here.
And I guess my contention is it's up to council to set what we believe a reasonable goal is. And that discussion from where my chair is has been a very difficult discussion to get any kind of commitment from members of council to get us to some sort of compromise situation where we can move forward. Because I think if we were to hold a vote today and the proposal was to expect the taxpayers to fund 100% of the pool, it would not proceed. And something in between that is possible, I believe, but I'm struggling to get direction from council in terms of where we believe a compromise, if a compromise is even possible. Because if you ask me today if I would vote for 100% tax funded pool, I would not. So where we arrive at that, how we arrive at that needs to have robust discussion at this table. And I agree, the Aquatics Committee is a stakeholder in that. But if we don't have a direction, a general idea of what we believe is possible that we can carry forward to have that discussion, I don't know how we have that discussion, because there is no consensus on council. You heard Councillor McCabe's comments, you've heard the comments from each member of council. There's clearly not a consensus here on how we proceed. And until we arrive at a consensus, I'm not sure how we have that discussion with those other stakeholders in this situation. Sorry, that's part of my frustration, but yeah, I'm really struggling to see how we advance this conversation unless people are willing to say, okay, let's get serious about finding a compromise situation.
And if I may follow up, you have asked me what I believe is unattainable. What do you believe, Mayor Lennox, would be an attainable goal for the fundraising committee?
I honestly don't know, but I would, you know, the scenario 3 that we had in the report before, where they split, from my perspective, if the community is committed to raising, say, $2.5 million for a $5 million plus pool, that to me is a real community commitment that this is a need. And I would go out on a significant limb to make sure that we can fund the rest of it. I'm not saying that's a final answer from me. I'm saying that I'm getting emails from people saying we don't need the pool too. There's more than one view on this, and we're got to try to find a middle ground.
Then I again strongly suggest that we schedule a public meeting to have a discussion with the residents of Wellington North, but specifically Mount Forest.
And I will put it back to you, Councillor Burke, and all the other members of council. Until we have a direction, there's no value in us having a public meeting. We all know that there are people in Mount Forest that want a pool. Absolutely, we know that. We know there are people who are opposed to spending that kind of money on a pool. We absolutely know that. We don't need any more input to know that. What we have to do is we have to come at this table with the support of our staff to a position that can be supported by a majority of council. Till we get there, I don't see that there's a whole lot of value in just having a public meeting, because we don't have a direction. And Councillor Rankin.
I'm sorry, I may be muddying the waters instead of helping, and being new, I've only been to one ad hoc committee meeting. But I'm just wondering, because the pool has been in dire circumstances for I don't know how many years now, and would it have been considered a capital project that would be included in the reserve funds? That money would have been put towards that over the years in a reserve fund to go towards that. And if it has been, Or do we know how much that would be?
I'm gonna ask Farhad if he can comment on it perhaps, but my understanding is no, there has been no specific fund created for it, but he probably has more background on that than I do.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox. Through you to Councillor Rankin. If you, I will just remind you our conversation in the last budget presentation, as Mayor Lennox summarized. We moved away from very project-specific reserve fund to a more general reserve fund. In the summary Brooke just presented, if you see, we have close to $21 million. But what part of it we can use for, let's say, pool related type of thing. So that will be the taxation related reserve fund, and that is around $1.6 million. So taxation funds, roads, taxation funds, recreation, anything who's funded through taxation, we have $1.6 million in reserve fund.
Brooke, have you got any suggestions for how we can try to arrive at some sort of resolution on this?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Lennox. I believe that staff was looking as a first step. The challenge is finding what the first step is forward, and we've developed a work plan that staff know that we can deliver a pool. It really is the financing question. And so we've tried to build in some key milestones for council to consider. And this is the first one, and we knew it would be challenging, which is why we wanted to provide some options for council to consider. So what I'm hearing and what I might recommend is that staff take this away and assume a go decision at this point with I guess a recommended township contribution. And my first thoughts is that when this pool was being discussed several years ago, it was closer to the $2.8 million number. So that was a number that was contemplated and discussed and proposed to the public. So they're familiar with that kind of range of costs. Now we have had more recent cost estimates, which is what we brought back to you in January. And that's where I think the concern comes. Now, that's not to say that we won't be looking for ways to reduce those costs, but we need to start somewhere. So my recommendation would be to come back with an option, probably looking at option 3, which is that split of the taxpayer contribution for 2.8 million. That essentially sets the fundraising target. Now, that said, with the meeting coming up in March, I think it would be very prudent for staff to bring this information back. The budget would have been considered on the 20th, so we would have further information to share with the committee. And at that time, the committee can consider what's being asked of them in terms of fundraising. If this is something that people feel is a workable solution, we can take that feedback. If they feel it's unworkable, we can also take that feedback. And we can also look at some of those fundraising strategies that we've talked about. Again, the fundraising strategies that we put in place are really dependent on the amount of money and the timing that we want to achieve for this pool. So we need some of those figures in order to have those conversations and put some parameters around them. Otherwise, unfortunately, we could just continue going in circles. And then I think after that, perhaps a public meeting does make sense. And we can discuss the options for that. And I think work in consultation and coordination with that ad hoc committee and council. So it's an opportunity to bring these two things together. We can talk about financing for both. We can talk about fundraising for both. We can actually do a more comprehensive open house that allows us to get more feedback on the implementation strategy. But I think a decision needs to be made as to where we're going or how we're going to get there first to take that next step, because I do believe that an open house at this point in time won't help us make that next step. So we really do need some decisions on the township upset limit to include in the budget, as well as what the proposed fundraising strategy would result from in that decision.
Other questions or comments on the pool discussion? Keep your nose above the water. Okay, so we're move away from that topic and go back to our general budget discussions. And even mind reminding me of the things that staff need direction on. So we can try to draw some consensus out of that.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I think the first thing was just confirming that we were looking for a tax levy impact around inflation, so 6.8%.
Okay, then we'll just do these one at a time if that's
Sure,
okay.
sure. I'll share the presentation if that helps.
Okay. So any thoughts on where we can land in terms of our tax rate expectations? Well, I'll start. I'm not seeing the other. Did you have your hand up?
No,
Councillor?
I just turned my microphone on to be ready for the conversation, but if you'd like to start, that's fine.
Okay. I recognize there's lots of people in our community that even, a tax rate, a tax increase that's near the rate of inflation from the last year is going to be painful for. But we do have to address the costs that have gone up for us to deliver the services that we depend on every year. And I think in order for us to work towards making headway in terms of narrowing the infrastructure gap that we're faced with, I think we have to keep it at or close to that type of rate in order to balance those circumstances. So. Councillor Burke?
Yeah, so I don't disagree that the tax levy needs to go up from prior years. I do question whether it needs to go up to 6.1%. We know that costs have increased not only for us, but also for our residents. And those of us that watch the news and understand sort of the economic times, they continue to talk about a possible blip or small recession. So I'm not opposed to the tax rate going up, but I would like to see it a little bit less. I'd like to see it around, I'm going to say around 4.5% to 4.5. I'm going to say 4.5 to 5%. I know that it's considerably higher than what we have had in the past, but I think just to stay in tune with some of the requests so that we don't fall behind, but would also like to see some of those things removed from the budget that we've talked about prior.
And just if you'd refresh my memory, what the top of the list is of those things that you would like to see removed?
Well, I think both Councillor McCabe and I talked about the fleet was one of the number one things. One of not understanding that the parking lot was not for this year. I can live with that. But I'd also like to have some conversation around concession 4 North and how we can maybe interject that into the budget.
So that's an added cost, what you're.
Well, that's an added cost, but there's also some other things in the budget that could be that I think could be removed. I mean, we know that the roof in Arthur for the Arthur Arena needs to be a part of the budget. Does necessarily the lawnmower need to be part of this year's budget? I think there's some wiggle room on some of the priorities that could be adjusted.
Okay. Councillor Rankin?
I know that we have wanting to create new spaces for different operations in the township. I'd like to see maybe some of them deferred and employ places that we have already to try and make do and for another year or so.
I don't think there was anything specifically related to that in the budget for 2023, was there? Brooke?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I believe some of those were future years that we would be looking at, but that's absolutely something that we can take back. And as we further develop that capital forecast, look at that in principle in terms of rather than building new facilities, I guess we're using existing spaces.
Councillor Hearn, have you got some thoughts to share with us?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts. I too would like to somehow decrease that impact on the taxpayer. I don't think we can come down a whole lot, though. It certainly is a struggle. Talking about paying for a pool and paying, and decreasing taxes at the same time, and then paving concession north as well, which I'm not really in support of. But I would like to shave it off a little bit lower than where it is. And I'm not exactly sure where one would do that. I guess I kind of leave that to staff.
Well, I do think that we have a role to play in this too. I mean, we need to give direction to staff. I mean, how we intend to, if we need the tax rate to be lower, we have to give some direction in terms of where we believe that can happen. And there's going to have to be some consensus among council as well.
Yeah, I haven't exactly figured that out. But as far as concession for north, I'm personally not really in support of that. But maybe removing a lawnmower or something to get it down a little bit could be feasible.
Just as a reminder, about 80,000, a little over 80,000.
83, I think, exactly.
Thank you. Represents 1% on the tax levy. So to have any impact, of a percentage, you need to cut $80,000 worth of expenses out. Councillor Burke, I see you.
Yeah, so I just have two general questions, and one is under on page 15, it's under operating budget summary analysis by segment. There's no environmental service budget. Is that part of the transportation services budget? It's on page 15.
Farhad, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, to Councillor Burke. So council is struggling with the tax levy. Our environmental services are user funded. And that's why you see zero in both the places, because what our cost is offset by the revenue we collect from the users for both water and wastewater.
Thank you for the reminder on that, Farhad. And my other comment would be, I think at this time, to help reduce some of the costs related to the budget, it may not be the optimal time to add some additional staff. So I know that that's part of the budget presentation, and it gives us an option of one versus the other. So we may have to look at potentially reducing that list as an option. But I think that also to Councillor Hearn's point, without knowing exactly what we have a list that says, high, medium, low priority, without really looking at some of the justification sheets. I think it's hard for council to pull out exactly what may not be as important. It may seem not as important to us, but it may be important to staff. So if we're looking to reduce the budget, maybe it would be of benefit to circulate those sheets from that were completed by senior management and departments, so that we have a better understanding and make better choices as to where we can reduce the budget.
Okay. I think Farhad, in the original presentation, there wasn't a full slate of the justification sheets, was there?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, yes, we had only one. I pretty much included the two justification, that is the pool and the Arthur wastewater phase 2. In anticipation that most of the discussion will be around that. For our next budget presentation, I can include all the 52 different justification sheet for council's information.
Okay.
Can I just add that it might be more beneficial to have them sent out prior to the discussion so that council has an opportunity to go through them?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I think what we're suggesting is that the capital justification sheets would be part of the next package that's sent out in advance of council. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments at this point? Councillor Hearn. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, yep, sorry, I didn't hit the unmute. I just wanted to thank Councillor Burke for bringing up the justification sheets, and I think that that would help us make more sense of a very difficult decision. It is very hard when it just looks like a line item and it's low, medium, or high priority, and to not know a reason why. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for including that in our next package.
Okay. What's the next item you got on your list of things we need to get some direction on?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, it is the items required for addition or omission from the capital program. So we talked a little bit about the Mount Forest pool and the upset limit for the township, and then any other items which we've heard some discussion on now. So
okay. Are there any other items that council would like omitted specifically or included before we get to a final decision? I'm not seeing any. Anything else on your list there?
Yes, through you, the comfort level with utilization of reserves or the reserve funds to reduce contributions to the capital program from the levy. So that's really around how much flexibility do we have, knowing the infrastructure gap that we have, but how much do we want to smooth the increase to the levy using some of those options?
Anyone want to share thoughts on that? Councillor Rankin, go ahead.
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'll start us off. I mean, we've got significant reserves if you add them all up. Some of them we don't have a lot of discretion around, such as the development charge reserves must go to development related projects. And absolutely, that's something we should use at every opportunity when we're doing development related projects. Another big chunk of the amount of money we have in reserves and reserve funds are related to water and wastewater assets and reserves, and that's part of our 5-year financing plan, which sets the rates for that period of time as well. So I think we should use those as planned. And the amount of reserves and reserve funds that we have that are not specific committed ones, I think I'm happy to have a fair bit of flexibility with it, but we also need to be aware that if we do have a big ticket item, such as a large capital project, we need to have some reserves available to be able to accommodate that and bridge some of that. So it's a balancing act. I'm prepared to be flexible on it, but I do want us to be thoughtful of our long-term needs as well. Other questions, comments on that from council?
Mayor Lennox?
Yep.
I think it's also hard to have that conversation when we haven't really tackled what we want to take out. There may be some room in the budget some asks that we are not able to take out to get to that sort of optimum tax levy. So I think I agree that there is some flexibility on how we use those dollars. But at this point, I'm not really committed to give a dollar, feel I can give a dollar figure until we sort of have that larger conversation about how we get to the levy that we're comfortable with.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Farhad.
To you, Mayor Lennox. Two capital project staff is seeking council direction. One is the pool. We had a good discussion about it. Second one is the Astor wastewater phase 2. There was two options we discussed on the last budget special meeting, being developed in the next 3 years, as per considering our current pace of growth. The assumption is that the pace of growth we have 2.26% last year is going to continue. Then we had a discussion about the constraint analysis bottleneck, around 200 wastewater and around 300 water capacity, residential home permit capacity we have currently. So a little bit of discussion on whether should we build, go ahead with the wastewater plant within the next 3 years. And one thought from the staff side is it will require us to find a vendor. So there's the tender process, and also put together the proposal for issue of debenture or debt. And it takes a little bit of time, around 6 months. So if council want to build it within the next 3 years, one way to look at it, to allocate a minimal amount of money, like $25,000 to do the debt application process and also the tendering process. So the decision point from council is whether to build it in next 3 years or do stages after 2025.
And we, just to be clear, Farhad, I mean, we've had fairly extensive discussion about the pool, and I think there's more to come before we get to a resolution on that. But I think what you're asking is around the wastewater treatment plant upgrade more than anything else. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Anyone have thoughts related to that? Well, I'll go out on a limb on this one. I think we need to look at the expansion of the Arthur wastewater treatment plant in a relative near term, maybe not the next 3 years, but not far from that. But I think what we really need to have is a financing plan for some projects, particularly that one. And the other element of that project that concerns me in the short term is our staff's ability to deliver on that. We have had some struggles with, carrying out some of the projects that we've created funding for. So I think I'd like to see some more information about our ability to financially deliver on that project, and from a staff perspective, or, maybe we need outside assistance to bring the project like that to completion. So before I make a commitment on that, I'd like to see some more information around some of that. I know that we have a number of options, perhaps some grant funding opportunities as well, and we need to explore some of those to better understand what the implications of a decision of that magnitude are to our future. So I guess my answer is not in this year's budget, but let's talk about it, because it's an important project that needs to come to discussion. Other questions or comments about that one? Okay, we get to the end of your list. Any final thoughts around the budget discussion? I know that initially staff had hope that we should get to a final budget by the 20th of March. I'm hearing some desire for some further discussion, so that original goal may not be quite possible. I'm looking to Brooke to reflect that. And maybe we talk about what we think at this point, what we think the next steps might be.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, thank you. No, this feedback has been very helpful today, and certainly what we'll do is take it away, and our hope is to bring back those options that were requested at the last council meeting for consideration. And I think what we need to do is outline the funding options along with what each option contains as far as direction for the budget. And what we can do is hopefully create a few options that gives council the ability to hone in on a preferred option, if not the option, with some modifications made. And so I've heard certainly the comments around the capital, and we will provide those capital justification sheets. I think what we can also do is as a staff team look at some options for potentially removing or deferring some of those capital projects based on the feedback that we received. And then, we could present that to council as one way to reduce the levy potentially. We'll look at including an option that does consider a pool going forward. And I think we've heard from you that we'll consider the wastewater treatment project as something for a future budget. So, and then we'll consider options of that staffing, the increases that we're looking at staffing as well, and bringing something back that also provides potentially less funding than was initially considered for that. So if we can craft those options and bring them back, that would be the next step in this discussion. Either council approves of those options and is able to select a preferred option, or at least it narrows down the conversation further, and we can further refine those options for some sort of approval after that date, in which case we would set another council date.
Okay, thank you. Any final comments or questions before we move on to the next item on our meeting? Not seeing any, so we will got a couple of public meetings to deal with here. So we'll go recess to deal with those public meetings under Planning Act. And the recommendation is with the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess March 6th, 2023 regular meeting of council for the purpose of holding a public meeting under the Planning Act. For According to Canada minor variance second meeting and BJ Industries Robert Major zoning bylaw amendment. Okay, mover and seconder for that. By Councilor Burke, seconded by Councilor Kern. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So we're recessed. We will deal with it. First, the minor variance. So I'll call the committee adjustment meeting to order and ask if there's any disclosure of community interest as regard to application 824/22 Gordon Canada. Councilor Rankin says not. Councilor Burke?
No.
Councilor Hearn?
No.
Okay, thank you, and I don't have any. So again, the application was 824/22. Oh, sorry, we need to deal with the minutes of the last. My apologies. We have a recommendation that the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes February 6th, 2023, 823/22, and 824/22 be adopted as presented. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councilor Rankin, Councilor Burke, thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, we'll move on to application 824/22, Gordon Canada Limited. Location of the subject property is described as Park Lot 22 and is municipally known as 250 Main Street South, Mount Forest. The property is approximately 654.39 meters squared in size. Purpose and effect of the application is to provide relief from the minimum width requirements for a proposed driveway. Proposed variance will permit a reduced driveway width of 3 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum width of 6 meters. Additionally, relief is sought to permit one residential unit to be located on the main floor of the commercial use, occupying 25% of the ground floor area. Other variances may be considered where deemed appropriate. That was notice given to this public meeting.
Notices were for this second meeting were mailed to property owners within 60 meters of the subject property, as well as mailed to the applicable agencies. Deciding to close the property on February 14th, 2023.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Matthew. You run through this one again.
Yes, gladly. And through you, Chair. Before you today is a minor variance application to provide relief from section 16.3B of the zoning bylaw, which states that an accessory residential use in the C1 zone shall be located above a commercial use. In addition, the applicant is seeking relief to permit a 3-meter driveway, whereas 6 meters is required. The application may seem familiar. As stated, was before council on the February 6th meeting, where staff and council expressed concerns with the size of the proposed residential unit located on the ground floor. Following staff and council direction, the applicant has reduced the ground floor area of the residential unit to 25%. I would add one point of clarity. In figure 1 of my report depicts 2 commercial units. A site plan has been submitted this morning, which is now changed to 1 larger commercial unit. But for the purpose of this application, it doesn't change anything, but just want to provide some extra clarity there. Thanks.
Thank you. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
Nothing other than what's listed on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Anyone wishing notice of the decision must submit a written request to the Secretary Treasurer. And with that, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from the applicant and or the public. Do we have any public members registered for this one?
Do not, but the applicant has been moved into the meeting.
Okay. And would they like to address council or the committee at this point?
Hi, my name is Alam. Were you guys referring to me? I didn't hear that.
Yes. Is there anything you'd like to share with the committee at this point?
Nothing as far as I know.
Okay, thank you. I'll open the floor for questions or comments from the committee. Committee members, anybody who want to speak to this one? Councilor Burke?
I'd just like to make a comment, and I'd just like to say to the developer, thank you for taking council's comments into consideration and bringing back something that I can definitely support.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Rankin?
I as well would like to thank you for taking our considerations. I know that it was proposed when you first submitted your proposal that there was allowed to have residential. So I appreciate you being able to scale back and sort of have a compromise. Thank you.
Anything I can do to help. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from committee? Did you have something further you wanted to add at this point, Alan?
Not really. If you excuse me 1 second, 1 second. Hi, sorry about that. No, that would be it.
Okay, thank you. And I too would like to add my voice to this is a difficult circumstance in that I know you've been working on the application before the change to our bylaw. I appreciate your willingness to compromise with your application. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if I'm not seeing any more questions or comments, then I'll call for the decision. We're going to do this one in 2 parts. And the first one is that the minor variance applied for an application A24/22 for the property described as part lot 22 and is municipally known as 250 Main Street South, Mount Forest, to provide the following relief. Number 1, that a reduced access to parking spaces of 3 meters be permitted for a proposed commercial mixed-use building, whereas the bylaw requires 6 meters. All those in favor? That's approved. And the second part that the minor variance applied for in application A24/22 for the property described as part lot 22 and is municipally known as 250 Main Street South, Mount Forest, to provide the following relief. Number two, that an accessory residential use be permitted on 25% of the ground floor of a commercial use, whereas the bylaw permits a residential use above a commercial use. All those in favor? That's approved. Thank you very much. We'll move to adjournment of the Committee of Adjustment then. I have a recommendation here that the Committee of Adjustment meeting held on March 6, 2023 be adjourned at 3:55 PM. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Burke and Councillor Rankin, thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our Committee of Adjustment meeting. I now will bring us to a public meeting to hear about a rezoning. Excuse me. And I'll call a meeting to order and ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. And this is regarding zoning bylaw amendment 02/23 for BJ Industries, Inc. I have no declaration, no disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councillor Burke.
Yes, as stated at the beginning of the meeting, works have been prepared by my employer, even though they are not part of this report.
Okay.
So I will excuse myself.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hearn.
No, I do not.
Councillor Rankin.
No, I don't have any.
Okay, thank you. Location, the land subject to the proposed amendment is described as East Owen Sound Road, Division 1, Part Lot 21, registered plan 60R2426, Part 1, and is municipally known as 7519 Side Road 7 East. The property subject to the amendment is approximately 0.8 hectares in size and is currently vacant. The property is currently zoned Hamlet Commercial C5 zone. The purpose and effect of the amendment is to rezone the lands from Hamlet Commercial C5 zone to site-specific M1-115 to permit a self-storage facility. Additional relief may be considered at this meeting. How is notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the property and as well mailed to applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on February 8th, 2023.
Okay. Matthew, welcome back.
I don't have a short walk, though. Perfect. And again, through you, Chair, before you today is zoning bylaw amendment seeking to rezone a portion of the subject lands from Hamlet Commercial C5 zone to site-specific industrial M1-115. The applicant is seeking the aforementioned amendment to facilitate the construction of 3 4,500 square foot self-storage buildings on the subject lands and add additional structures as the business scales up. Staff have received a letter from a neighboring landowner pertaining to fencing around the property. At this stage, staff would note the application is subject to site plan control, where some of the details associated with buffering and fencing and whatnot will be looked at closely. And all in all, the application conforms to the zoning bylaw as well as the official plan and applicable provincial policy, and planning staff have no concerns with the application, and I welcome any questions.
Okay, thanks for that. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
Nothing that is not listed on the agenda.
Okay. Anyone wishing notice of the decision? The bylaw will be considered at the regular council meeting following this public meeting. Persons wishing notice of the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. And with that, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from the applicant and or the public. I see a couple of guys I suspect are part of the applicant crew. Do you guys have anything you'd like to comment on at this point? Okay. Do we have any public members who wish to speak to this application?
We do not have anyone registered.
Okay. Anyone else like to make comments on this application? Kathy?
I'm speaking on behalf of my sons, JKW Farms. They own the property that surrounds the property in question here. And just put out there that, yes, we are concerned, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. We are concerned about the possibility of trespassers onto our farmlands and people cleaning out their units, dumping garbage. So just would like to have that addressed.
Thank you. I don't think we have anybody else from the public. Any questions, comments from council? Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Lennox. I was just wondering, the neighboring farm that is around it, is the residence near it? Now, it says there's buffers going to be put up near a roadway or a residence. And I gather you would like to have a buffer put up between the boundaries. Is there a residence near that?
There is no residence. It's vacant farmland. And right now, we don't really have a plan to put a residence on it. But it's just more the dumping and trespassing that we're concerned about. So we'd like to see that incorporated into the site plan approval.
Councillor Hearn, did I see your hand up?
No, but I can comment. That's okay. I do share those concerns with the letter. So I'm just wondering if that's something that the applicant would consider, something to prevent trespassing. And I am also wondering whether there would be 24-hour cameras. I believe most storage facilities do have those. So those are my two questions.
Okay, I think the applicant is here and maybe try to address that.
Thank you for hearing this presentation.
If you could just state your name, please, for the record.
So I'm Robert Major, applicant for the zoning amendment. There is plans and works that we're planning on putting fencing around it to help with trespassing. These projects don't, any of the people I've talked to that have carried out these projects, they're not a high traffic area. Something to this scale is going to attract approximately 2 people per hour. As far as security, yeah, we camera and surveillance is certainly something we can look at. We haven't looked into it 100%, but that's not an issue as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Did you have anything further, Councillor Hearn? You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, sorry. That answered my question. I guess they're looking at putting fencing, but is that something that we can require as a committee to put that in kind of in stone kind of thing?
Yeah. I think Matthew's gonna
Thank
try to address that.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. Yeah, so as I mentioned, at site plan stage, it will be something we will be looking at and ultimately will require at that stage. So maybe there's not the need to double down at this stage and tweak the bylaw, as like I said, at site plan stage, staff will be requiring the fencing for sure. So.
Good.
Thank you. Very good.
Okay. And in terms of the surveillance thing, the users of it may appreciate that as much as the neighbors around too, in terms of catching illegal behavior. Any other questions or comments at this point? So when we come back into our regular council meeting, we will be dealing with the bylaw for this. So we'll adjourn the public meeting. Recommendation here that the public meeting of March 6, 2023 be adjourned at 4:04 p.m. Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin, I hope. All those in favor? So we're adjourned from the public meeting. Thank you. Come back to our regular council meeting. And we'll need a motion to. If you want to hang on a little bit longer, we'll get to the actual bylaw. You're free to leave at any point. We're not tying you here. And no, I'm not going to dismiss you. Okay, so let's resume the regular council meeting. The recommendation here that the council of the corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the March 6th, 2023 regular meeting of council at 4:05 PM. Okay, a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Hearn. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll deal with the passage of that bylaw. I assume Councillor Burke, you will want to be excusing yourself from that as well. Okay. So I have a recommendation here that bylaw number 19-23 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 66-01 being a zoning bylaw for the Township of Wellington North be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Are you going to mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. So that's approved pending any appeals, as I'm sure our CBO will explain the process further. Thank you, gentlemen. And no, you're not dismissed. You can leave at your own will. We'll move on to adoption of the minutes of the council and public meeting. So we have the regular meeting of council from February 21st, the public meeting for February 21st, and the special meeting of council for February 27th. A recommendation here that the minutes of the regular meeting of council and the public meeting held on February 21st, 2023, and the special meeting of council held on February 27th, 2023 be adopted as circulated. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Burke and Councillor Rankin. Any discussion on any of those minutes? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We don't have any business arising from previous meetings, so we'll move on to items for consideration. Anything that anyone would like to pull out for further discussion? I'm going to ask that we pull 2A, just because I want to make sure I understand what's happening with 2A through 2D, is it 2C anyway? Any others? Councilor? Okay. Do you want, did you want 2A and 2B?
No, I think it's too late.
Okay, well, I'll take 2A off. I just wanted one of those to be pulled. From my perspective. So 2B, any others people would like to discuss? Councillor Burke?
4A.
4A, this is a award of the standpipe rehab. Okay. Any others?
I just had a question about 5A.
Okay, we'll pull that. Okay. Anything else? So just for clarity, we have 2B, 4A, and 5A. Last call for others?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I've declared indirect pecuniary interest on 2A, 2D, 2A, B, C, and D.
So we're only going to pull 2B, but yeah,
Okay.
you'll want to excuse yourself from that one, I'm assuming.
But do all of them not have to be pulled so that I don't vote?
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Thank you for that. Good catch. I was trying to facilitate this. All right, so we need 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D pulled because of the pecuniary interest. 2D as well? Okay, because it's not the same applicant. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Burke. Any others? Okay, we'll deal with the resolution to approve all other items. The recommendation is that all items listed under items for considerations on the March 6, 2023 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Burke. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll go back to 2A. And I'm hoping members of council aren't going to ask me to read that entire recommendation. But this is in regard to the consent applications B4 and B5 -23 in Mount Forest. And could I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Hearn. Any discussion on that one? All those in favor? That's carried. We'll move on to 2B. This is same applicant, different report. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin. And I think Councillor Rankin wanted to ask a question about that one.
I just had a question. There are some mature trees that are right by the roadway. I was just wondering if they are on municipally owned land. And if they are, will these trees be staying when the construction begins?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I believe the trees are on 2D on Ayrshire Street. Unless maybe you could clarify if we're looking at Martin Street.
Yes, and we're looking at the Betty D application.
Yep. So the question on trees is for Martin Street.
Yes, I'm not
Okay.
sure which one of those sections they're on. There's two different ones. They were done two different ones. They're going to be able to be kept.
All right, so for trees that are potentially on the road allowance, Public Works will be able to answer that, what their process is to remove or leave the trees. And for trees that are on site, Matthew can speak to those trees.
We'll go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, so through you, Chair. As mentioned, the trees on site it's somewhat of a difficult piece, I would say. So there's a tree bylaw in place. I'll use the words, unfortunately, the tree bylaw only covers large swaths of land as opposed to, on a granular level, a one-off tree isn't captured in that process. Council can, as you know, request, to save, whatever trees are in question. Where it gets a bit tricky is then in terms of enforcement, is who enforces that. And then at a later stage, once the consent is registered and that condition is then cleared, the township nor the county don't have any really mechanism or teeth to enforce that those trees are then, preserved or removed. So unfortunately, it's just up to the applicant at that stage.
I think he's addressing trees on the private
property. Correct.
The trees I'm wondering, they look to be quite close to the edge. So I'm just wondering if they were on municipal.
So yeah, on pertaining to those trees, I'll defer to Matt to for that process.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lennox. So trees that are on public property, like past practice has been that basically if the applicant wants to cut those trees down, as long as it's at their cost, we let them do it. It might not be advisable, or it might not be council's decision to do that in the future. But I don't, from an enforcement standpoint, that's very hard. Because if someone cut the tree down this morning, I'm not sure what Public Works would do. But we haven't really, like I say, by and large, it's been more, we wouldn't pay for it. From a Public Works standpoint, we're looking for liability as far as like trees falling down and causing damage. And we haven't been looking at it as much from a preservation standpoint, but the MSS that you just approved has a component that will look at tree preservation and planting preservation. Oh, I can't hear you, Councillor Rankin, sorry.
Oh, she just said thank you, Matt. Did you have follow-up, Penny?
I did, thank you. It's too bad they have to go down, but I know the lots are going to be so narrow to try and get equipment in to build on those particular 2 lots. It's going to be very difficult, but I had hoped.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this one? I guess I have one, and that it applies to all of these Betty D applications. I understand it was staff's recommendation not to pursue plan a subdivision with these, and I'd just like to better understand the background on that if I could.
Sure, through you, Chair. The short and sweet of it, without getting into all the planning background, the official plan seeks to have, when you have 4 or more severances, proceed through plan of subdivision. In this case, plan of subdivision was sort of ruled out, given that there's already a public road and that there isn't a need for, private road or any new municipal roads. So in terms of process wise, it's fairly straightforward to just, sever up the lands and build and then, services from then on. So
And so if I could just follow up on that, and you may not be able to answer it, but the other Matt might be able to answer that too. Is the intention to service all of these lots individually, or is it a collective servicing situation? Matt Aston, go ahead.
Yep. I think from a Martin Street standpoint, it'll be individual services. And from a Cork Street standpoint, there'll be some servicing that comes off Cork Street, but also there'll be, they're kind of working through a plan that will be a condo that will just have one service from Cork Street.
Okay.
Or one set of services, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on that one? All those in favor? Sorry, Lisa, did I cut you off on that one?
No, I had my hand up several times, and now that you've let me speak, I've been having a lot of trouble hearing. No, it's not related to this. A lot of trouble hearing Councillor Rankin. I'm not sure whether she's turning her microphone on, so I missed a good part of the context of Councillor Rankin's discussion, but I've picked it up, but it makes it difficult.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll try to pay more attention to your waving hand. Okay, so we're on to item C2C. Again, this is part of the same applicant's process. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that one, please? Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Herm. I'm hoping. Any discussion on that one? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move to 2D. This is a different applicant. In this case, this is the application for John and Linda Thompson. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor Rankin and Councillor Hearn. Any discussion on that recommendation? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to 4A. This is in regard to the rehabilitation of the Mount Forest standpipe. And I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report Ops 2023-009 being report on the award of the Mount Forest standpipe rehabilitation. And further, the council award the rehabilitation of the Mount Forest standpipe rehab to Dason Industrial Services, Inc. at a project cost of $1,545,727. And further, that council authorize the Director of Operations or their designate to sign any necessary agreements with the successful bidders to execute this project. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor Rankin. And with that, I'll open the floor for discussion. Councillor Burke?
Yeah, so I just wanted to pull this item out for discussion because I think it's a good news story. To start with, we're going to get some funding, so that's great. This project has been on the budget for a little bit, and I think that it's really going to spruce up the entrance to Mount Forest as the standpipe is starting to look a little rough. So thank you to Matt and his team for getting this project funded, and I look forward to the work being started. The work's going to start this spring, Matt.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. Yeah, if it's approved, it will start in May or June.
And do we know about how long it will take for the project to be completed?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, like 8 to 12 weeks. So it's like a 3-month project. It's a big project.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on that? Councillor Rankin?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, to Matt. If I am reading this correctly, it's completely covered for the cost between the fee that they're charging plus the 2 grants. So is that correct?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, to Councillor Rankin. So in 2021, council approved $950,000 to recoat the interior and the exterior of the Mount Forest standpipe. But subsequently, we've got a grant for $750,000. So between those two, like there's been a pre-approved project to paint the standpipe in Mount Forest. And between the federal provincial grant and the municipal
What's already been allocated through the budget. You froze up on us, Matt. Did we lose you? It's hard to believe you could stay that still. Okay. Did you get a satisfactory answer?
I think he answered it before he froze up. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, there's Corey. He can pinch hit, I guess, here. Welcome, Corey.
It's a good analogy, Mayor Lennox, and through you. Yeah, I think you're on the right track there. What Matt was suggesting was what was pre-approved by council in 2021, along with the provincial and federal grant dollars that we received. There'll be no new ask for 2023 for this project. The money should be there and ready to go.
Okay. And I just had one question. Hopefully you can handle this one, Corey, too, is this is significantly above what our original budget was. Yeah, we know inflation certainly has been a factor the last year or two. Anything specific about this project that's driving the costs from what we were expecting that you can comment on?
No, I think through your Mayor Lennox, we are just seeing costs a little bit higher than what we anticipated. There's some other work that's going to take place, some safety upgrades as part of the project. But again, this should give us another, 30 plus years with this the standpipe as part of our water system. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a combination of the increased prices and some of the safety features that need to be completed at the same time. And this is the time to do that.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to 5A. This is in regard to the cemetery fees and charges. And the recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report CLK 2023-10 cemetery fees and charges. And further, the council approves cemetery fees and charges increases effective July 1st, 2023 as follows. Single grave, $900, care and maintenance, $600 for a total of $1,500, or a niche that'll hold 2 urns at $1,275 and care and maintenance at $225 for a total of $1,500. Need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Councillor Burke, second by Councillor Rankin. And with that, I'll open the floor for questions or comments. Councillor Rankin.
I just had a question down for the winter, the standard burial. I was just wondering why Mount Forest or Shelburne would be so much more expensive than other ones. Most of the fees, we seem to be right in the middle of the other areas, but I'm just wondering why Shelburne would have to be so much more.
Right, so through you, your worship, first of all, since this agenda was published, I've been speaking with Southgate, and in fact, they don't do winter burials anymore. And I do have a report coming, hopefully to the 20th, to talk about a request that we've had for winter burials. And in discussions with Shelburne, it is just a lot of work to do a winter burial. You've got to plow the snow out, you've got to move the snow, you've got to bring extra fill in, and then take the fill out and put it somewhere while you're waiting. And so quite often, even though they have a winter burial fee, it's dependent on, I mean, if it had happened on a Friday, they wouldn't have done a winter burial because they're limited like we are with snow plow operators and trying to keep the roads open, let alone keep the cemetery open. So I know that your fees and charges have to be cost recovery only. I don't think they're that far off. I think the other municipalities, I can't say why they're so low, but it's a lot of work to bury someone in the winter.
Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Brings us to the end of our items for consideration. Do we have any notice of motion this afternoon? Not seeing any, so we'll move on to community group meeting program report. Anybody have anything they'd like to report on for that today? Okay, not seeing too many takers on that one. We'll move on to our cultural moment. And graciously, Councillor Rankin has agreed again to share that with us.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox. The cultural moment for March the 6th celebrates Wellington North Horticultural Societies. The horticultural societies or garden clubs in Ontario have been in existence for about 200 years. They bring people together who believe in the benefit of plants and trees in the community. The first Ontario club was formed in Toronto in 1834. The Ontario Horticultural Association was formed in 1906. Separating it from the Ontario Agricultural Association. Limited funding for the local societies is provided by the provincial government, and members pay an annual membership fee to their local society, out of which a fee is paid to the provincial organization and to the district board, which represents societies at the provincial level. The district board arranges regular meetings for all of their societies with speakers and a business agenda. There is also an annual provincial convention hosted by different districts each year. 300 or more members from around Ontario attend at their own cost. In Ontario, there are 19 districts, each with multiple societies. Arthur District Horticultural Society and Mount Forest Horticultural Society are two of the 14 societies in District 7 of the OHA. Arthur's Club was chartered in 1918 and officially began in 1919. Mount Forest Society celebrates 1953 as a start date, although there was a group for 55 years prior to World War II. Mount Forest Horticultural Society's 61 members are responsible for 4 main town entrance beds, as well as Royal Grant Park, planters and flower bed. The Murphy Park with 3 flower beds plus a new native planting project around the platform currently in progress, and Ruth Barker Memorial Rose Garden and a spring cleanup maintenance at the sports complex. ADHS's 25 members maintain the 2 raised planting beds and the bed around the mural billboard in Cenotaph Park, as well as the raised beds at the north and south entries to town, 2 flower beds at the post office, and the 10 black concrete planters that appear every summer on downtown corners. In 2021, these 2 societies donated in Mount Forest 787 hours and in Arthur 450 hours to help keep our downtowns beautiful. A green downtown is a successful downtown. Our thanks go to the members of the 2 groups in Wellington North. Submitted by Doris Caston from the Wellington North Cultural Roundtable.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. We'll now move on to our confirming bylaw, and the recommendation is that bylaw number 20-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North at its regular meeting held on March 6th, 2023 be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Can I move in a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to adjournment. Just before I do, though, I would draw your attention to the upcoming meetings. Arthur Chamber of Commerce this Wednesday at 5:30, Rec Parks and Leisure next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Mount Forest Chamber next week, Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Arthur BIA on the 15th at 7:30 p.m. Wellington North Cultural Roundtable Thursday, the 16th at 1:30, and our next regular council meeting on the 20th at 7 p.m. That I would bring us to the adjournment, a recommendation that the regular council meeting of March 6, 2023 be adjourned at 4:31 p.m. Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Hearn. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.